This is Classic FM.
Hello again, and today I'm delighted to welcome Tony Banks to Classic FM to discuss your new album, 6 Pieces for Orchestra. It's a very clean title. Why that number?
Well, there were just 6 pieces, and those students of my music will know that the previous one was called 7, because there were 7 pieces on that. So really it just started off as a working title, and it was a bit of a joke, and then just sort of thought, well, I'll stick with it really, because I think it's quite sort of simple and neat. In many ways, I just wanted to call the various pieces on the record just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, but I wasn't allowed to do that, so I've given them titles. I quite like this, because when I hear music, I often don't relate it really to anything sort of as straightforward as a sort of title or something. I just hear it as a kind of more of a abstract kind of thing.
It's interesting because there's elements of the pieces. They've all been given certain names or certain things that hopefully will inspire the audience as they're listening to them. But there's no necessary story or through line to the pieces. Were you quite keen to make sure they were standalone?
Well, yes, that was it really. I mean, obviously the way the titles have gone is to give the shape of a kind of universal story. You've got 2 pieces that are led by a lead instrument, one saxophone, the other violin. And the sax piece I've given the sort of the siren, female protagonist, if you like, and the violin piece is called Blade, which is kind of like the male protagonist in a story, and the other pieces sort of fit around the story, ending with a sort of like, journey pieces, a sort of contemplative piece just towards the end, and then the big finale, which is kind of the destination, if you like. So that's just to give it some sort of a shape, and I don't want titles that kind of interfere with the way you hear music, and you can do that sometimes, I think, and so I don't want people to sort of start thinking about something that's nothing to do with it, and they're reasonably sort of abstract and general kind of names. And
you mentioned the solo instruments there. Why particularly those 2, the violin and the saxophone? Well,
saxophone was suggested to me by a few people actually, and I've been a friend of Martin Robertson. I've known since he was so high, and he's a good friend and everything, and he's a fantastic musician. So I thought it was a great opportunity to do that, really. I like it as a lead instrument. It's got a lot of character, and to sort of understand it, perhaps having sort of used it once or twice in rock music and things. So that seemed a natural one. And then I thought, well, if I'm doing that, it'd be nice to do another one. And the violin is a very obvious choice, I suppose, because it's the most expressive, I think, of all the solo instruments you can have. And relates a little bit more again to what I've done in the past in terms of what I played on synthesizer and solos and guitar as well, which is sort of obviously guitar and violin are quite closely allied, I think, and they just can sort of tear the heartstrings in a way that no other instrument really can, I think.
I'm interested in how the album came together, because I understand it was improvisations that you yourself had done or you'd discovered, and also orchestral snippets that you'd found. Where did they come from?
Well, no, the whole thing is just improvisations, and that's how I write, really. I just play and things come. Sometimes it's on a piano and sometimes it's on the various synths I've got, because stringy sounds which stop you playing quite as fast and everything. And that's how they evolve, and it's really been the way I've always written. Everything on there is totally, comes from those improvisations. I had quite a good, it must have been, I don't know how long ago it was now, a year or 2 ago. I had a period of about 3 or 4 months when a lot of stuff came. And sometimes I just tried to, occasionally when you improvise a thing and you hear it back, the great advantage we have over the old masters is that you can record everything as you go along, essentially. With the computer it's very easy. And then you can also, if you can't quite work out what it is you played, you can see what you played, so you can work it out. But I had some passages, of 2 or 3 minutes long in one case, actually, which I thought sounded good pretty much as it was. I didn't really feel I needed to do too much to it. And so I just, obviously you have to tidy it up a bit, arrange a bit and do little things. And quite a bit of that ended up, particularly in the last piece, the section which was sort of ran pretty free. And if you can capture something when and we tried to do this with the Genesis and things like that, trying to capture something when it first is born, it has something, and it's quite difficult to get it back sometimes. If you more you fiddle with it, the more you lose it, I think. That's not to say some music works very well being fiddled with a lot, but if you sometimes just get that thing, and you do things you wouldn't otherwise do, you may stay on a bar for longer than you should or something, or you might you do a strange chord change that you didn't sort of think about, or a discord you didn't really sort of expect to play, and it's quite nice to keep them.
I was going to say, because if you hear something and you think, I've got the seed of something that could be evolved here, is there sometimes a sense that you have to have a dogged perseverance with it to go with it, or you think, if I can't find it, if it's not natural, I'm going to leave it be?
Yes, well, I tend to be quite a spontaneous player. I just tend to play, and if I have a day when nothing's happening, then I just go out and weed the garden, you know. Doesn't really worry me too much, you know. I have no time constraints. I didn't on this particularly at all. So you just go there, and some days things happen. Once you've got an idea going and you know sort of where you're heading, then you can do a lot of the other work of sort of putting it into form and making sense of it and trying ideas and things. You can do slightly more, you know, on a sort of 9-to-5 basis. You know, it doesn't require the inspiration, but the inspiration, you can have 2 minutes of inspiration in a day, which is, you know, gets you the whole thing going.
And what about instruments now? Because is it true that you can really compose an orchestral piece just with a keyboard now?
Well, you can simulate it to some extent, and you can give a lot of ideas. You know, I still worked with an orchestrator on this guy called Paul Englishby, who also conducted, who was brilliant, I think, because I still feel a little bit, perhaps I slightly lack in confidence to do the final thing. But I had, on all the pieces, particularly on the final piece, for example, I mean, you know, I had a pretty extensive arrangement there, and you know, a lot of which is there. And in terms of, you know, the composition, the structure, the lead lines, all the harmony, everything, that's always stays right through. It's just sometimes when I'm, you know, I might be going down too low for an oboe or something, or, you know, just something else where I haven't really sort of, because you get very used to thinking in the rock world of not worrying about natural balance. You know, if you want a flute to sound over drums, guitar and everything, you do it. Whereas of course in orchestra you can't do that really. You've got to kind of bring everything down, which meant particularly on the 2 solo-led pieces that I had to really streamline the arrangement a lot, which Paul helped me with a lot, because it was just no way you could have heard the instrument over the top.
I mean, it's described as a classical recording. And I know that people are very keen to often put things in a genre. They like it to fit somewhere. Is that a fair description of this album?
Well, classical conjures up sort of Bach to me, or Mozart. Orchestral is the word I prefer to use. I mean, I think it's within the sort of what you might call the classical idiom. I suppose that's the truth of the matter. It's not, you know, it's, that's why I find myself on Classic FM rather than on kind of Radio 1. You know, I mean, that's just the reality of it all, really. But you know, the music that's being created now within this sort of orchestral area, I mean, it's quite wide, and it's not. To call it all classical, I think, is a strange thing. But that sort of seems to what happened. I mean, everything is called classical, whether you're sort of Rutter or Turnage, or whether you're Bach or Beethoven. Really, I mean, it seems to be a label, and that's what you sit under.
How have you noticed over the years that the music industry has changed?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously speaking more from my end, you know, so the rock end, because that's what I've experienced more. But it has become more personality-based, and that's probably true in the classical world as well. You know, the sort of the singers and the violinists. I mean, if you look good, it helps, and all the rest of it. Whereas, you know, when we first appeared on the scene back in the 70s, you know, we sat on stage in even worse clothes than this, you know, and just sort of heads down and played, and no one really sort of thought too much about it. Although a little bit of flamboyance from the singer occasionally, which did help quite a bit, I have to say. You know, it was kind of, we almost tried to sort of steer away from that thing, which I think now is what people sort of go for. People are so interested in kind of people, celebrity and everything, that that has changed everything. It is much more commercially driven than it was as well, I think, in all areas of music. You know, people try to sort of force the pace a bit, I think. Record companies such as they are nowadays, but general managers and people behind the Simon Cowells and all this, well, you know, they're kind of constructing something really, whereas before it just used to sort of emerge, and that's why you got the Singing Nun top of the charts, you know, which I used to rather like actually. So you've got something just sort of totally off the wall would suddenly come out of the blue.
Do you think it will go full circle?
I make no predictions. I just sort of follow this. I think, you know, there is perhaps the web has kind of created an area where people can sort of be heard and emerge without having to have big business behind them or anyone trying to push them. And that's essentially a very good thing, I think, and that will more and more happen. The only difficulty, I think, is filtering through all that stuff to try to find something that is actually worthwhile listening. I mean, someone's got to do it for you, really, because you can't listen to everything that's out there.
Tony Banks, thank you very much for coming to talk to Classic FM, and 6 Pieces for Orchestra is out in March, is that right?
March the 26th. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
This is Classic FM.